The first time you read a line from Sigmund Freud that lands inside you, it feels like someone has opened a door in your skull and let a light in. Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. Say that aloud and notice the small physical changes, the tightening in the throat, the breath that shortens, the old memory that shivers awake. This script is a long walk through the sentences Freud left behind, not as ancient curiosities, but as instruments you can use tonight, tomorrow, and throughout the rest of your life. Start by imagining your inner life as a room you only visit in passing. Most days you move through it with the lights low, leaving corners uninspected. Freud's voice insists you turn the lights on. Being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise. That is an instruction, not a platitude. If you keep living by habit and image, the small self-deceptions calcify into decisions you never meant to make. Practice naming one thing truly for 5 minutes now. Say it out loud. Feel how the world shifts by a fraction. That fraction compounds. Consider freedom next. Most people do not really want freedom because freedom involves responsibility, and most people are frightened of responsibility. Hear how this cuts through the modern worship of choice. Choice without responsibility becomes a carousel of excuses and deferred life. When you're scared of judgment, failure, loss, or the work of repair, you trade actual freedom for a sanitized version, safer, flatter, and less meaningful. The path out is small. Choose one decision today and accept its full consequence, even if it hurts. Another of Freud's sentences asks you to reframe the present struggle. One day, in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. This is not sugar for pain, it is a lens. When you view difficulty as material being shaped rather than damage being done, your relationship to suffering alters. Apprenticeship to your life replaces victimhood. This doesn't erase the hurt, it adds narrative gravity and a reason to keep showing up. Let vulnerability be a focal point. Out of your vulnerabilities will come your strength. Vulnerability is not a brokenness to hide. It is porous material that permits repair and connection. When you reveal an edge, someone else can glue themselves to that edge and help hold a new architecture together. Strength built on secrecy cracks under pressure. Strength built through exposure bends and recovers. Imagine an iceberg. Freud famously said the mind floats with 1/7 of its bulk above water. The conscious mind is a sliver. Most motives, desires, and patterns live invisible beneath the surface. That picture explains why you sometimes act against your better judgment, why dreams feel like messages in code, why a throwaway comment can ruin a week. Begin learning the language of the hidden. Record dreams, notice slips of the tongue, sit with impulses without acting on them. Curiosity about the hidden reduces shame and increases choice. Men are more moral than they think, and far more immoral than they can imagine. Allow this paradox to settle. It softens one-sided judgments of self and others. We are capable of acts of grace we cannot predict, and acts of harm that surprise us. Accountability in life requires recognizing both potentials in yourself, then designing practices to honor the moral and constrain the destructive. Rituals of repair, honest friendships, concrete restitution when necessary.
The voice of the intellect is a soft one, but it does not rest until it has gained a hearing. Intelligence will not win the day if it competes on the loudness axis with craving, anger, or grief. Create conditions where the soft voice is heard. Write one paragraph before reacting. Walk for 10 minutes before replying to provocation. Make the smallest ritual that inserts a pause. The intellect will then accumulate influence, muscle by muscle, choice by choice. Freud's wry observation about progress, what progress we are making. In the Middle Ages, they would have burned me. Now they are content with burning my books, is a diagnostic of how societies change. Progress opens new freedoms and invents subtler forms of exclusion. Stay skeptical of the applause that says you're on the right side just because a trend includes you. Courage often requires remaining in the uncomfortable minority when truth demands it. Return to the raw and particular. In the unconscious, nothing is ever forgotten. This is the psychological equivalent of archival persistence. Every sensation, insult, and tender touch leaves a trace. You do not erase a memory by ignoring it. You simply change how it organizes present behavior. Therapy, journaling, ritual, and creative re-encoding are ways to refile those archives so they stop directing you from the shadows. When Freud says we are never so defenseless against suffering as when we love, he identifies love as the portal to everything valuable and terrifying. Love strips armor. It also reveals which wounds need tending. If you find relationship exposing your old fractures, lean into repair practices rather than avoidance. The safety you need is built, not discovered. Name the wound, own the contribution, and then make a small reparative act. An apology, a consistent time, a tangible promise kept. One day, in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. I repeat this because it deserves repeated practice. When nostalgia later transforms struggle into a strange beauty, it is not because the pain was necessary for vanity. It's because it taught you form, patience, and the architecture of endurance. Plant seeds in your present that your future self will thank you for. Consistency, curiosity, steady humility. Being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise. This is an exercise prescription, daily, short, specific. Not essay-level confession, but the micro-honesty that aligns speech with experience. Start with the non-threatening. What did you avoid today? Whom did you flatter out of fear? What did you refuse to see? Small admissions change neural pathways and calibrate moral taste. Build this honesty like a tempo exercise in music, brief, repeated, and precise.
Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. Think of an unspoken anger that surfaces as sarcasm months later, or a sorrow that becomes chronic fatigue. Naming a feeling does not remove its complexity, but naming locates it. Once located, it becomes accessible and transformable. Create a habit. When a mood arrives, label it aloud. I'm feeling resentful, and track the story that follows. At the end of the week, you will have a map. From error to error, one discovers the entire truth. Allow your experiments to be sloppy. Freud sees thought as a process that triangulates truth through successive approximations. If you're haunted by perfection, reframe failures as data. Try one new form of conversation, one new boundary, one small transparency. Each error informs the next, and truth emerges in the sediments of attempts. One must be poor to realize how poor one is. Here, Freud connects material reality with psychic awareness. Scarcity doesn't only mean lack of resources, it means constrained imagination. Poverty of experience narrows possibilities. Invest your attention in expanding internal resources, books, friendships, art, new skills, because internal richness creates options even when external resources lag. When you say to yourself, I am not defined by this mistake, Freud's framework invites you to parse identity from action. Identity is not a static label, it is a pattern of responsive choices. Use Freud's observations to split event from essence. When you act poorly, own the act. Repair where possible, then design the next move that contradicts the old narrative. This repeated contradiction rewrites the script that once ran automatically. Dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. Carry a dream journal. Dreams compress imagery, emotion, and associative logic into symbolic scenes. They are not literal, they are metaphor engines. Learn the smallest syntax. Who appears, what emotion dominates, what symbol repeats, and you gain a conversation with the buried architecture of your life. Over time, patterns reveal their logic, and you acquire leverage over recurrent difficulties. The interpretation of dreams is the via regia of the unconscious, echoes in every line of exploration. Use dreams as laboratories. If an anxious theme recurs, try an experiment in waking life that contradicts the dream's script. Note how the unconscious reacts. Is it relieved? Threatened? Less dramatic? The unconscious adjusts. With patient experiments, you change the scripts it offers you at night. Being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise, appears again because it's tactical. Choose a single honest sentence every morning. Make it a micro goal. 3 words, then a clause. Repeat and escalate. The voice that used to be drowned by social performance begins to claim space. That voice leads to choices that are more painful at first and truer later. Most people do not really want freedom should become a checkpoint when you see yourself choosing passivity. Ask, what responsibility am I avoiding right now? Name it and take one small accountable step, not the grand leap, but a tiny covenant you keep. The practice of holding consequence rebuilds the muscle of freedom. Out of your vulnerabilities will come your strength, becomes a design brief for how you live in relationships and craft art. When you make work that exposes tender things, expect blowback and healing in roughly equal measure. That's the deal. Use safeguards, supportive friends, clear boundaries, and regular debriefs. Vulnerable work demands container building as much as courage building. Unexpressed emotions will never die, threads through parenting, love, work, and art. The instruction is proactive. Create pathways to expression, rituals, letters never sent, art pieces, structured conversations. These are expression technologies you can adopt. Without them, the buried will surface as breakdowns, reenactments, and misdirected rage. With them, buried content changes form, from poison to fertilizer for new growth. One day, in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. Is a future anchoring technique. Picture your 60-year-old self returning to this moment. What would they admire you for? Choose one action now that older self would nod at. It rewires immediate gratification into long-term craft. The ugly details of discipline become threads of a tapestry when seen with that future hindsight. Finally, take Freud's sentences not as decrees but as experiments. Pick one quote that pinches you the most and run with it for 30 days. Keep a short log: what changed, what resisted, what surprised you. Make tiny structural moves in your environment to support the experiment: a notebook, an accountability partner, a fixed time to practice micro-honesty. The point is not to idolize Freud, but to test these heuristics against the hard material of your life and see if they refine your capacity to live with courage, clarity, and compassion. If you have listened this far, what you have is a map of levers more than prescriptions. Freud's sentences are instruments you can wield: lights to turn on in dark rooms, lenses to reframe struggle, and diagnostic phrases to point at habits that shape your days. Use them with patience and keep the smallest muscle work daily. The most radical, durable change is incremental, repeated, and anchored in truth.